In the 1960s or whenever, pop artist Roy Lichtenstein made a series of paintings which took comic book panels and reproduced them in big, hoity-toity looking canvas sizes and displayed them in art galleries. Lichtenstein seldom acknowledged, let alone compensated the original artists, arguing that his attempts at exact copies of their work constituted an original work by recontextualizing it. It was no longer mercenary, disposable entertainment, it was now meaningful because it was placed in a context where it should be meaningful, and in doing so, contrasted itself with the original work, which was garbage. Lichtenstein went so far as to reproduce the halftone patterns that industrial printers use to convey shading in comic book coloring. To me, choosing to specifically highlight the industrial process which makes this picture available for mass consumption portrays it as a sort of product, art made to sell rather than to communicate. Therefore, by placing it in an art gallery, he's asking the audience if what they appreciate about art is the content of that artwork, or the signifiers of sophistication, class, and prestige that are associated with it. Now, there's certainly some thought-provoking questions aroused by this work, right? It asks some interesting stuff about the nature of high art versus low art, and what exactly constitutes a transformative work, and the nature of contextual signifiers to how we perceive a work of art, but at the same time, it also does make me want to strangle him. It's weaselly smug bullshit that granted him a lot of prestige and acclaim for what is, essentially, work he stole from other working-class artists for the purposes of mocking them. This is what I think of when people talk about so-called AI-generated art, which is similarly derivative of other artists' work without any compensation or acknowledgement, but unlike Lichtenstein's paintings, do so without the pretext of creating new meaning. As much as tech con men would like angel investors to think otherwise, we are nowhere near a point in history where machines can approximate the artistic skills of human beings. Now that's gonna sound nuts to you, considering that your feeds are probably, like mine, inundated with supposedly AI-generated art. It seems pretty spooky, right? You can just enter a short string of text, and a computer will actually spit out a recognizable image. An image that if you didn't know better, you'd think a human artist made. You'd be forgiven for thinking that the computer is behaving like a human artist, with all of the requisite skills and knowledge that entails. Like a human artist, it has absorbed enough information about how to convincingly render 3D objects in 2D that it can apply the same techniques that a human would to create that image. Just faster, and with fewer technical errors. As it happens, this is also how the people who make these things would like to market them, as explicit replacements for human artists, which can do anything that a human could do. Replacements who will never need to be paid overtime, who will never ask for any sort of creative input on what is being produced, and who, critically, will never unionize. But that isn't how these programs work. I mean, yeah, they won't unionize, but their process is different from how a meat artist would behave. Essentially, AI art generators are big sorting algorithms that can assign certain meanings to certain patterns. The more times it does this, the more it understands what patterns look like what things, the more convincingly it can render that thing. Think of it this way. You're sitting in a room with the software and you roll 100 dice. You remove all the dice that have a 6 on them. The software carefully observes this, and then you tell it to run the simulation again. So it rolls 100 dice and removes 7 random dice. Because it saw you remove 7 dice. That must be what you want, right? To remove 7 dice? And you tell it, no, computer, that's wrong. Please try again. This time, it removes everything over a 3, reasoning that it saw you get rid of all of the highest numbers, so you must only want low numbers. And you tell it, no, computer, that's wrong, please try again. This time, it removes all of the 6s, which is what you wanted, but it also removes all of the 3s and 5s, because it could also usually see those faces on the dice you removed. So you tell it, that's wrong, start over, please. And on you go until the software has more or less come to understand what pattern you're looking for and how to repeat it. Now, this is absolutely similar to how a human learns, albeit simplified to the point of absurdity. You learn to speak as a baby by making random noises, your goo-goos, your gagas, etc. And then you're either corrected or praised depending on how well those noises match the noises we call words. Baseball, orangutan, Malaysia, etc. A human artist might, for example, study how light interacts with objects, or human anatomy, or how to draw sexy wolves if they want to make any money at all. That is itself a very complex form of pattern recognition that is similar to the machine's process. But there's a critical difference here. See, a machine can do those things perfectly. It can simulate light convincingly enough to appear photorealistic in many cases. It can take a human body model, or sexy wolf model, and render it perfectly in any pose, and once input, it never forgets or misjudges that pattern. If the concern was that computers would master the technical details of art to an extent that no human being could ever hope to keep up, I mean, yeah, we're well past that point. They've been able to do that for decades. The human mind might be able to paint a picture of Gollum that looks more realistic than the one in the Lord of the Rings movies, but no human being on Earth could do it as consistently, 24 frames a second, and also perfectly sync Gollum's motions to Andy Serkis's performance and seamlessly insert that into live-action footage. Hell, we don't need to get that complex about it. Go ahead and try and draw a circle freehand. Just go ahead and try. Bet you won't, because your circle would look like shit. You should feel bad about your terrible circles because of your weak human hands. A computer can draw a circle. Computer draws a circle right every time. But even though a computer can do things a human being could never hope to do, it still needs a human being to be told what to do. You can have a perfect simulation of light interacting with perfect simulations of other objects. You still need a human being involved to make that anything, to make it interesting to look at or make it represent something to a human mind. And, dozens of human beings to make those simulations in the first place. But the computer can't judge what is and is not interesting is my point. It can't judge whether or not it has made something that would appear convincing to a human being looking at it. It can only operate according to the instructions given to it. In a nutshell, this is the so-called problem that so-called AI-generated art proposes to solve, to make human involvement in the generation of art optional rather than strictly speaking necessary. And it will not do this. At least not for a very long time, if ever. Not until computers think like people's is, which might not ever happen. Who knows? I guess what we should do is probably torture thousands of monkeys to find out. For one thing, how do you know when the art is good? Unless you know how to make art good, like an artist would know, how do you know if the computer did good or bad? If it didn't look right, how would you know how to improve it without involving a human with the requisite artistic knowledge, i.e., an artist? For another, what are these computers learning from? If you use AI to generate a cartoon, the AI has to look at a lot of cartoons to figure out how to make something look like that. It can mimic how other artists have made cartoons, but the nature of the technique it uses means that it can never deviate from what inputs it receives. It can never have a new idea of its own. It can only repeat ideas that humans have shown it. Take, for example, this video from Corridor Digital, in which they use AI to convert live-action actors into the art style of Spider-Man into the Spider-Man. They use AI tools to automatically convert the photo images into cartoonoids. But it still takes a group of incredibly skilled professionals to make something interesting to look at. Those professionals are also consciously aping the style of another work of art that was not created by AI, relying on stylistic decisions those artists made. And given all of these advantages and constraints, the end result is certainly impressive for what it is, but I mean, it don't look like it looks like it was made by a computer, you know? Like, you can tell it's not made by hand. It's pretty janky. It could never be as dynamic and interesting as the material it's learning from because, unlike a person, it has no idea what is or is not interesting to people. Fundamentally, all it can do is look at the thing in front of it and attempt to do that, to make that thing again. A lot of people might respond to this by pointing out that all artists mimic other artists, which is certainly true. But that's not all artists do. A human artist might, for example, deliberately render something incorrectly in order to convey an emotion. They might choose to combine art styles in ways that no other artist had done previously. A computer trained on a certain art style would not be able to deviate from the examples given to it unless trained to do so by a human being. So then, in that case, is it the computer doing that, or is it the human doing that? Furthermore, the imperfections and mistakes that a human artist makes in their artwork contribute to the charm of it. Much of that is what we refer to when we say art style. And this is certainly a matter of taste, but to me, the mistakes and imperfections that AI-generated art make right now are just like really frustrating to look at. They look like noise, like random senseless data, incomprehensible to a human eye. Artists can be idiosyncratic in ways that software can't, because software is not deliberate. It's just guessing, and then asking a human if it guessed correctly. When we call this AI-generated art, that's marketing. Because it's not. There's no such thing as artificial intelligence. Computers are not sentient. They don't think in the ways that humans do. And even if they can match the processing power of the human brain, and you could get into a whole argument about whether or not they can in some supercomputer in some lab somewhere, maybe, but we have not yet evolved to a point where we understand consciousness enough to model it on your MacBook. It might be more accurate to say algorithmically generated art, but even that is potentially misleading because Is an algorithm itself generating the art? Because if it's learning and repeating patterns it's learned from other artists, isn't that just algorithmically combining art? It's taking bits and pieces from other works and stitching them together like a collage, or in some cases, applying what is, in essence, an extremely sophisticated Instagram filter to an existing image. All of this high-minded stuff puts aside the issue of plagiarism. If I try to draw like Mike Mignola, I'm imitating him. But if a computer model is trained on Mike Mignola's art, it's literally copying and reproducing bits of that art in granular enough detail that it might not be readily obvious. And genuine question, is that plagiarism? I don't know. I mean, if I took a comic book and cut it up into confetti and then rearranged it into a new image, I think we can agree that's not a derivative work. But this is where previous analogies for this sort of thing start to break down. I couldn't use the confetti method I just outlined to convincingly reproduce new artwork in Mike Mignola's style. At least, not without the same amount of effort or more that it would take Mike Mignola. But with this software, I could make thousands of Mike Mignola drawings in the time it would take him to make just one. So then, hypothetically, why would someone hire Mike Mignola? You could just generate his art for free. Now, okay, we're nowhere near the point where AI can outclass an artist like Mike Mignola, but it can already outclass an artist like, say, me. A lot of semi-professional artists are already losing work to automated software. This isn't a hypothetical happening in the future, it's happening right now. Think of all of the artists who would have been drawing sexy wolves that don't get to. A lot of people aren't going to get the money they deserve for drawing very sexy wolves. It kind of gets rid of a lot of the incentives to even become an artist. Like, why bother? You can't get paid doing it. If you manage to do anything unique or interesting, your work's distinct essence can be extracted and reproduced by anyone else, thereby removing any incentive they may have had to pay you. It would represent a sort of heat death of human creativity, in which new ideas would no longer be introduced, and art would be a continuously repeating process of generating the same few things over and over forever. Which is to say, Marvel movies. Because that's the point of all of this, right? So-called AI-generated art is the perfect model of how art is, and always has been, destroyed under capitalism. How art is transformed from self-expression into commodity. How artists are trapped doing work they don't necessarily want to do because it's what sells, robbing us all of whatever they would have come up with if allowed to pursue whatever they felt like. The domination of crass, mass-appeal commercialist juggernauts choking the life out of everything else. The artists and creators who make the damn things we like in the first place being stripped of all creative control, all revenue, all agency, and replaced with machines who produce a consistent drip feed of overcalculated, focus-grouped, joyless gruel. Art is kind of pointless without artists. Like, I mean, don't get me wrong, it can still be fun, you can still like it. Sometimes when I'm in a bad mood, I like to watch the scene from Avengers Game where Captain Avenger picks up Thor's hammer because it gives me the good feelings cheaply and effectively. It's junk food, devoid of the nourishing qualities that we are meant to take from art. But if he hits the purple guy. AI-generated art doesn't communicate, it imitates. It can't tell you anything because it doesn't know anything. It's a one-way street. Anything you take from it was already there inside you. No other artist put it there. Now, obviously, it can be indistinct from human-created art, but I do feel like there's something metaphysically unartistic about it. Because we don't just like art because it looks nice. We like that, sure, but there's more to it. It helps us recontextualize what it means to be a person by connecting to the feelings of others in ways that they have deliberately intended for us to do. If a machine could do that, it would need to be a person. Now, all that being said, look, I think there's absolutely room for these types of things as tools for artists. I don't think the technology is inherently immoral, no more than I think it's immoral to, like, use a compass to draw a circle. I think there's value in it as something artists can use. It has only become dangerous because we live in a civilization that sees artists as roadblocks to be overcome in pursuit of monetizing art. An economy that has decided that art is without any intrinsic value other than the monetary value it can produce. Roy Lichtenstein claimed that he recontextualized the work of other artists by putting their work in art galleries, that they weren't owed royalties because all they did was draw a picture, whereas he took that picture and made it into a statement about the intent of creating it and pictures like it. Hanging a drawing made to make a pulpy comic book to sell for a nickel and placing it in the environment where we go to find important, meaningful works That says something, don't you think? And that's all well and good. But hey, asshole, none of those artists made disposable commercialist art because they wanted to. I'm sure they very much would have liked to have made more personal, meaningful work. But they also need money for food and clothes and drugs. The problems of AI-generated art are not unique to AI-generated art. They're the result of a larger and more intractable problem. Artists, shackled to the profit motive, will never be able to reach their full creative potential. They will always be held back by the need to create more and more Funko Pops. Listen to me. I'm from the future. By 2026, all matter in the solar system will be Funko Pops. Funko Pops are a gray goo scenario. It is for this reason that I have pledged myself to the one thing that Funko Pops lack, which is eyeballs. They don't have eyeballs, they just got little dots. They don't have eyeballs because eyeballs are the only thing that can stop them. Eyeballs will protect us, but at what cost? At what cost will the eyeballs protect? Hello and welcome to the Eyeball Zone. Here in the Eyeball Zone, how are these transitions getting even worse? Am I running out of ideas? But also, leftist creators' eyeballs on them. Hey, you made this whole video about art. We all love art and looking at art, but hey, some of us can't afford to get art commissioned. You haven't thought about the fact that we can't afford to get art commissioned. Remain calm. At Emily Will Paint You, Emily will paint you. Emily does free, professional-ass portraits of people. It just, out of the kindness of her heart, just paints these gorgeous-ass portraits, and you can sign up to get one. But probably by the time this video comes out, by the time you see it, the line's going to be pretty long. But still, you can look at the pretty portraits. They're nice to look at. And hey, you know what? If you like watching people do art, you could always hop into one of my weekend streams where I draw a little comic book and encourage people to talk about the various victories throughout their week. Do those every Saturday and Sunday, 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on YouTube and twitch.tv/ThoughtSlime. So, you know, you can do that. Hey, do you have a small leftist project you'd like to see featured here on the Eyeball Zone? Then send no more than one email to thoughtslimeeditor@gmail.com with pertinent details such as your preferred pronouns and the word eyeball somewhere in the subject line, and perhaps you shall find yourself trapped here in that dang old Eyeball Zone of ours. Thanks for watching the video. This is just a little quick one. Hey, patreon.com/thoughtslime is how I afford to do these videos. And so if you want the videos, also go to thoughtslimeshop.com to buy a Fair Trade Union made t-shirt featuring my lovely little logo or the Scaredy Cats logo there. These are some various ways that I make money. How do you make money? Sound off in the comments.